Hi, gang. The Joy of Football this week has 4 segments as the first week of the European Leagues ends. We start with 3 of the best: young player, old player, player, and Brentford get quite a look in this week.
And they're doing comparisons with mostly forwards who have been making the news, as have 2 clubs, Hull and Ipswich.
Then Martin's letter from the gantry is his week, an old man's week. And what a week, because it's a young man's type of week, which includes a trip to Brighton and Hove Albion and a trip to Craven Cottage.
And we finish with one game, the one game from the start of our past seasons where we've remembered and relished it, and we're going to tell you all about them.
Yep, opening game of the seasons. Don't forget, you can get more involved by going on the Patreon. Please subscribe or comment. We want lots of comments, feedbacks, and get involved that way. And of course, you have got our writing on substack.com where you can read Martin's letters and my feverish rants. Otherwise, let's not delay. It's a bit of a long one, this, because there's so much to talk about. And I think you want to hear all of it.
The Joy of Football podcast. With me, Neil Barnett.
And with me, Martin Tyler.
Looks rush shot in! Rooney! Aguero!
The Joy of Football.
Hello, the Joy of Football podcast with Martin Tyler, the greatest commentator in the world, and me, Neil Barnett. We're back on Zoom this week, not for any other reason than I've got a virus and I'm not going to give it to Martin. So I'm in my kitchen and he's in his. And we are looking back on the first full weekend of league football across Europe. Martin, you've been to 2 games. I sadly have been to none. But watched 10 million on television. Should we just go?
I think we should, and there's plenty to reflect on. And I'll follow your lead. And thank you for not passing the virus on. We'll probably get viruses on our computers now instead. But I hope you feel better soon, mate.
Thank you. Right, we're going to start with the return of, for the new season, 3 of the best.
And he makes them pay.
3 of the best. He's made them pay, and that completes a wonderful hat-trick.
3 of the best: young player, old player, player. Martin's done a me. He's got a load of young players. Martin, go.
Yeah, I was trying to whittle 3 down to 1. Then I thought, Neil always puts in 4 or 5 on the category. So I've gone for 3 because I like to see in the flesh, as you say. I've been to 2 games, so I picked players from 2 games in order, I suppose, of chronology. Jack Hinshelwood at Brighton, who is one of their own, as the fans sing. He's from his famous footballing family, and he's been moved around the team. He's played as a wing back, and he's played a defensive midfield player. He played off the front of Jorginho Rutter and scored 2 goals, opportunity goals. He's got one of those 6 senses to get into the penalty area that you can't coach, I don't think. He just knows where the ball's going to drop, and he makes his chances possible because of the sharp brain that he's got. And he was one of the stars. I'll talk about Villa a bit later on, but it was definitely 2 sides to that particular game, the Brighton side and the Villa side. But Brighton, having nearly gone behind very early to this rather makeshift Villa team, and rolled up their sleeves and were exhilarating for as long as they needed to be honest. That was well before half-time. The game was done and dusted. And Jack played a big part in that.
He's been a regular for quite a long time now, as you say, in different positions. I mean, you say wing back. I've seen him play right back, left back, in a 4. I've seen it all over the shop. I don't think I've seen him play for England under 21s.
He has played for England under 21s, hasn't he? I think. I'm not sure. That's one thing he caught me out. I don't know. he is now 21, but he's probably still eligible. But they say a jack of all trades and master of none. I think I understand why that cliche is in the dictionary, if you like. But he is master of most. But he is a jack of all trades, and I do think that it goes under the radar a little bit because Brighton have a lot of foreign signings. They're known for their great recruitment, but this is one that they just nurtured from almost from birth with his family background. And yeah, it was a great start to the season for him and for Brighton. They took him off because he didn't play in the game in Tromsø. He was a substitute, I think, in the European game, because they've got another European game coming up in a couple of days. So I think he was held back for that, and he'll play a part in that. They obviously got to try and not turn it around. It's 0-0 from the first leg. You would expect them to go through. But so he's won. Then the one that I've championed is Gonzalo Garcia, who's only 22, and I championed him because last year, if you remember the Club World Cup, he did very well for Real Madrid. Now he's at Fulham, having been brought in by Arbeloa. And what a friendly derby, by the way that game is. Now, I know Chelsea won, so maybe that's why they were so friendly, but you've got mates in the two managers, really close friends, Arbeloa and Xabi Alonso, and the Real Madrid connection worked for Fulham in terms of the transfer. And I do think he got an opportunist goal. He didn't play very well in the first half. I think it was all a bit too quick for him and his Palacios, the other player that they brought in for Real Madrid to get used to the Premier League. But he poached a goal in the second half and held the ball up well. He's not the biggest, and he's. I think he will learn fast. And Fulham obviously probably don't score enough goals as a club generally in the Premier League. Now they've got a chance. Raul Jimenez has moved on and started with Wolves in incredible fashion. Had a great World Cup, of course, as England knew as well. They faced him. And I think it's a bright signing. So I saw him in the flesh and I was pleased to see that he scored. And the other goal scorer, of course, was Josh King, who's still only 19. He's one of their own at Fulham and born in Kingston, be very close to where you're sitting now. And he was dynamic. He gave Fulham a threat. It looked as though Chelsea scored so early, just over 30 seconds, that they might dominate with the traditional power base that they have over Fulham. But Josh drove them back into it, making runs in behind, very industrious. And I was pleased he scored only because I was at the game you were there, Neil, last season at Stamford Bridge. Chelsea beat Fulham at Chelsea, and he had a perfectly good goal wiped out, so good that VAR and the PGMOL apologised to him for the decision for awarding a free kick against a teammate earlier in the move. So those are my three.
And I have to say, doing my normal team to make you scream of best individual performances against Chelsea over a season, Josh King is penciled in at number 10 straight away. He was outstanding, a brilliant 90 minutes, and he is a good player. He is a really good player. I think King and Garcia might be enough goal-scoring-wise, goal-creating-wise to keep Fulham up, because I've been quite worried about Fulham. So, yeah. My young player is now an Evertonian, and it's Tyrique George, who, of course, came through the ranks at Fulham. The reason I've chosen him is...
He came through the ranks at Chelsea.
At Chelsea, so did I say...
Yeah, you did, yeah.
Oh, God, that really is dementia. The reason I've chosen him is I, of course, saw him as a young player before he made his first team debut at Chelsea, and thought he was a real prospect, with my normal sceptical view that real prospects don't make it, so I didn't get too excited. When he got in the first team at Chelsea, it was because the club was in the UEFA conference, and with all due respect to Brighton being in the UEFA conference this season, you really play a load of trash in your opponents. and it is an opportunity to give a shadow team a chance to shine. So Tyrique George played most of the conference games, and he just hadn't become an adult. He was an 18-year-old trapped in a 15-year-old's body, as far as football was concerned, and he found it really difficult to take on men. So he just didn't show his qualities. But he played regularly, and he got himself with a big injury list into the shadows of the first team. And he came off the bench at Fulham when Chelsea were 1-0 down and trying to get in the top 4 for Europe, and scored an equaliser, playing the central forward role from outside the penalty area. But it didn't fire him up to anything special. That went into last season, and last season he played here and there, Carabao Cup, a couple of times coming on in Champions League games against lesser opposition, and he still looked a boy. In January, he was loaned to Everton. David Moyes gave him one start in the second half of the season, just one start, and he came off the bench a lot. I was gobsmacked that David Moyes bought him in summer for £18 million. I think Chelsea wanted a bit more, but it was 18 million plus 6 million add-ons. I think Everton might have to win the Champions League for that. I can't imagine what the 6 million add-ons would be. But I was gobsmacked that they bought him. I was gobsmacked that he played. And he played in his preferred role, which is off the left, which he didn't often play for Chelsea. He played more off the right. But he played off the left with Ndiaye on the right, and the big centre forward.
Barry.
Barry in the middle.
This is against Crystal Palace we're talking about,
And watching it, I saw a man. He's filled out. And I think he's 20 now. He's filled out. He looked strong. He couldn't be knocked off the ball. He looked a man. And now I'm going to just watch and hope that he really develops into the fantastically skillful, with a wicked shot player that I saw at 17. And I think if he does, Everton will have got a steal.
Crossed for the goal, didn't he? For Barry's goal with the header. And David Moyes in the interview afterwards said, when asked about this kind of supply line, suggested that he wanted more of it, that this was something that maybe they had worked on in pre-season that had got him the start. And it was a cross on the right, so he did find himself out there. And I actually saw him score a goal in the Club World Cup as well, when he got a substitute appearance when Chelsea went on. So he's got, I presume, a conference winners medal and a Club World Cup winners medal in his locker already. So
yes, anyway, I wish him good luck. And Everton, I wasn't at all sure about coming into the season. I'm even less sure now about Crystal Palace, but we'll come on to that later. Who's your old player?
Well, I make no apology for revisiting the loss of Kevin Keegan, because the ceremony at St James's Park was maybe the period of the weekend, if you like. Football's very good at doing this sort of stuff, and nobody deserved that kind of tribute more than Kevin. And then, of course, at Fulham, where he was there a couple of years, and he came in as, I think, a chief operating officer. I'm not sure what that role was, but became the manager, got a promotion, and was obviously very lovingly remembered, and the cause, which actually went on for a very long time, and deservedly so, was befitting his part in that in London football as well. It was, of course, Fulham brought on a player called Kevin at the end, and I wondered how he'd got an equaliser, would have topped it off, really. But there's obviously some time now since Kevin passed, but I can't believe that somebody was so invigorating, so he would have loved the game last night. His kind of football, full on front foot football, and generally the Premier League, if you like. It wasn't like that. Why Kevin Keegan was such an exceptional manager, it wasn't front foot football everywhere, and it is much more so now with the desire, I think, from everyone, from the clubs, from the officials, the officials to make the game as attractive as it could possibly be, and it was just a mixture of love and sadness, really. I think, especially up at St James's Park, the fixture was probably in the fixture list before Kevin passed away. So, but it couldn't have been more appropriate, really. So, well done to everybody who was involved, both clubs and the Premier League itself, for making that happen and showing the world how much Kevin Keegan was loved.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's not been said enough is his last game for Liverpool was the European Cup final, their first triumph in the European Cup. He went away to Hamburg. When he came back and played for Southampton, and they were runners-up the year he was there, one of the years he was there, but they had Chilton in goal as well. I mean, there was some team. I couldn't believe how much better he was than when he went away to Liverpool. That was quite extraordinary. I mean, going to Europe for a player like him in the late 1970s was very unusual. And he came back. He'd learned so much. It was unbelievable. And then when he went to Newcastle as a player, of course, his last season with them, Chelsea were in the second division as well. So I saw him playing for Newcastle in the second division. And he was an old man leader. He wasn't that old, but in football terms, in those years, you were old at 30, and he was about 33, 34. And although it was a big shock when Newcastle got promoted, I think in third place under Chelsea and Sheffield Wednesday, it was a big shock when he retired and didn't play back in the top flight. When I thought about it, I thought it was the right decision. He got that right. And then what people also forget is he went to Newcastle and was just unbelievable as a manager. And then he went to Fulham. And you're right, he was the chief operator. They were in I think they were in the third tier, or were they in the second tier? I don't remember. And he brought in Ray Wilkins as his manager, and it didn't work. And he sacked Ray, and he took the job himself, and he got them promoted. And getting them promoted to the top flight was what got him the England job. He left Fulham for England. I mean, it's an unbelievable outturn of events, and just success.
But success with energy, enthusiasm, a caring side that was very apparent when I told the story a couple of weeks ago when we paid our tribute, that he would never leave an autograph unsigned. Mm-hmm. You know, he would always be there for the fans, and that kind of it doesn't get publicity, that sort of thing. But I witnessed it. I was obviously waiting to see him at times when he was signing autographs, and we had an appointment to talk football. But he was a lovely guy, and yeah, it's very sad. Even it's watery-eyed thinking about it, because he was extremely kind to me, and I was one of those standing up and applauding at the cottage.
Lovely. My old player is Damien Duff, the Irish winger, who played for a large number of clubs, obviously including my Chelsea for 3 years, where I got to know him really well. The first thing I want to say about Damien Duff is he had 2 good World Cups as a player for Ireland in 90 and 94. He was always a winger who thought about the game. He was fast, but he wasn't electric. and he needed to understand the game in order to succeed. He'd been at Chelsea a year as the record signing when Arjen Robben arrived, who was, like him, left-footed. And in those days, a left footer played on the left and a right footer on the right. And it was also when his second season was Jose Mourinho's first season. And Mourinho, without any warning, Robben missed the first few weeks of the season, injured. Arjen, always injured. Without any warning, moved Duff from the left wing to the right wing. And he embraced going to the right in the days when no one else was there on the other foot, completely. And what was clear was he was a left-footed player with a strong right foot. It didn't faze him. He never thought twice about using his right foot to deliver the ball into the penalty area, which is quite unusual for a left footer. So he had a great career. He went on to Newcastle and Fulham, played in the Europa League final for Fulham, and had a good long career. When he retired, he went back to Dublin, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he became the Shelbourne manager, which had been his club that he supported as a youngster. And he won Shelbourne the league for the first time in generations. And it was a big, big thing. But then he left the club. He didn't stay after that. And he went quiet for a couple of years. And all of a sudden this summer, he turned up on that Irish bench at Brentford as an assistant to Keith Andrews. And he was a quiet person in the background as Brentford thrashed Tottenham 3-0. He'd have enjoyed that. He would have enjoyed that. And he is now part of the Brentford setup. And Keith Andrews just strikes me as a very intelligent manager who wants intelligent football people around him. And he's got an addition to his team, his management team, that will help make Brentford better. And I'm delighted that Damien Duff is back in the Premier League.
I'm glad you mentioned he played for Fulham because one pre-season, I was assistant manager at Kingstonian, and we had a pre-season friendly against Fulham. And we'd made the mistake at another club of beating Fulham's pre-season youngsters. And so when this fixture was arranged for at another club at the Kings Meadow Ground, which was a place where Fulham were pleased to come and play, proper stadium, they brought, I think, 6 internationals. One of them was Duffer. And so I can see him now playing. He was playing on the right, and just going looking, thinking, what's happened here? That player of his caliber is actually someone we're trying to stop. We didn't stop him, I can say, and but he was always great to chat to, and as you say, a proper football man. So good luck to him.
Yeah, fabulous family as well. Yeah, your player.
Well, we're going to stay with Brentford because Mamadou Sangare was making headlines before the first Premier League weekend because the word was out in the football community that Brentford had paid a record fee, around £40 million.
40 million euros.
Oh, 40 million euros. Well, probably I'm not in the financial markets like you are, Neil, but that probably not too different. 40 million pounds.
Actually, I'm wrong as well. It was 39 million pounds. I remember now. It's 39.
Oh, right. Oh, good. I was nearly right then. Anyway, so he's an international from Mali. He's a midfield player, can do pretty much everything. He came through the Red Bull system at Salzburg, and then went to Rapid Vienna, and then for a season, and then went to Lens, who had the season of their life, didn't they? Where they won the French Cup, I think maybe for the first time. Finished second in Ligue 1, and the Brentford recruitment module, the algorithm, obviously identified him through the data. But already in pre-season, he was so good that, as I say, word reached me, if you like, on the football grapevine that Brentford got a really good player here. So I was intrigued to see what he did. Even though he hadn't kicked a Premier League ball, he had something to live up to. And boy, did he live up to it. Sheer quality and pass, movement, all the things that you need from a midfield player. And for Brentford to splash out that sort of money, they'd done their sums correctly in terms of football data. So I think I'm just advising everybody to keep an eye on him through the season, because he could be one of the standouts. I know it's a silly thing to say after one game, but the thing that resonated me even more than the performance was everyone was talking about him, and going around pre-season games and bumping into people, and the word was out, and he didn't disappoint.
For the opening goal, he played a 1-2 with Utaro and pulled the ball back for Lewis Potter to score. Utaro's return was one of the best passes of the weekend. It was an absolutely sublime weighted pass through the gap in the defence for Sangare to run onto, and it didn't even get mentioned on television. But I thought it was one of the passes of the weekend. And Utaro, who was at Bournemouth.
I think we're talking about Ouattara.
Ouattara, is that how you want to say it? He was at Bournemouth and couldn't get a regular first team place. And he looks a player. He really looks a player. And Lewis Potter as well. I mean, I was considering Lewis Potter for my player of the week. He played left back, and he, as Brentford attacked, he went from the left back position to the right wing to receive the ball, gave it to Sangare, and then went to centre forward in the penalty area. And then the Sangare raced down the side of the penalty area, backed off to the penalty spot where no one was marking him to strike the goal. And I remember when Rico Henry got injured, the left back, he did his cruciate ligament, didn't he? And I thought they'd really struggle without him. And Lewis Potter, who was a winger, went to left back, and he is looking a player. I mean, great story, Brentford.
Yeah.
Okay, my player is from Leeds, which obviously makes me want to wash my mouth out. Anton Stach. He scored the only goal of the game in the last couple of minutes at Nottingham Forest with a free kick. Brilliantly taken. Although I'm thinking Oliver Glasner will have something to say to the two-man wall, as it was from wide, that failed to jump high enough to block the shot. But it beat Sels, the Forest goalkeeper, at the near post. I didn't blame Sels. It went over the wall. It was the wall's fault. But it was a brilliant free kick goal. I didn't realise that from the start of last season, that was Stach's fourth free kick goal and his fifth goal from outside the penalty area. No one in the Premier League has scored more goals than him from outside the penalty area in that time. Not even Dominic Szoboszlai, who is the master of those goals. And everyone talks about Szoboszlai. We don't talk about Stach. I mean, he's a quiet German midfielder, but he plays every game for Leeds, and he's dogged. He didn't have a particularly good game against Forest, but if you're a struggling team, you need some specialists who are going to win you some points, and he won them 2 points when he hadn't even had a particularly good game with an absolute mastercraft strike.
We had talked about him, Neil, because I remember telling you that when Stach first came over, the first thing I was told about him was that his dad is the top tennis commentator on German television. And so, and has a great love of football, of course, as well. And so it's intriguing. We get like sons of former players, don't we? And we don't always get from my profession people coming in. And it was a nice. It's a nice. You can use tennis references when you talk about it. You can smash in a free kick or volley and serve up the winner. So he's a good player, and again, He's not a headline grabber until he does something like this, and he's grabbed a few headlines in the year that he's been in English football.
Yeah. Okay, that is three of the best back. We move on to another returning segment, comparisons. Martin, 2 years ago, just over a year ago, 2 seasons ago, I just want to give you the top scorers in the Premier League. This was the season that Liverpool won it under Arne Slot. Salah, 29. Isak, Newcastle, 23. Haaland, 22. Mbuemo at Brentford and Wood at Nottingham Forest, 20. Wissa at Brentford, 19. First comparison, Brian Mbuemo and Yohan Wissa.
Well, the comparison is that they played brilliantly together. And whether they've maxed out since they've split up, the answer is probably yes. And in Mbuemo's case, I must say it's somebody who offers more than just goal scoring. I mean, he's a very bright footballer. He is a left footer who plays from the right, but that gives him the ability to come in on that left foot from a narrower position, really. So he gets more central to hit those curling shots that he's famous for. And I think he's mastered that very difficult skill of putting on a Manchester United shirt and believing that he belongs at the club. We've seen players down the decades who've failed to do that and have lost all their confidence because they can't hack it where every minute of every game is scrutinised. But his first season is very good. It's still a Manchester United work in progress, I think. But he's played his part and certainly justified the signing. For Wissa, much more of a goal scoring player, pace in behind, and you play to his strengths, and you get that kind of goal. And clearly, he got caught up in the whole thing with Isak, wanting to leave Brentford to fill the gap that Isak was creating by virtually going on strike at Newcastle. It wasn't, and it reflected particularly well on anybody that. And Wissa didn't have much of a season really, but he's starting to get it together. And if all that's cleared now, and I haven't seen him play particularly well for Newcastle in the games that I've been at, but it's a new season. He's begun well in a big game, and different kinds of players, but definitely complemented each other when they played together at Brentford.
Yeah, I think that Wissa is much more of a counter-attacking player. And so he can run in behind. He was brilliant against Liverpool. He was absolutely brilliant. But if Newcastle hadn't been under the cosh so much, I'm not quite sure how good he would have been. Isak, and Mbuemo is. I thought he should have gone to Liverpool to replace Salah, because I thought he was similar and could grow into that role. Having gone to United, he was okay, but he wasn't as good as he was at Brentford. And I think he needs now to double his productivity. I think he got 9, 10, 11 league goals last season. He needs to double his productivity.
He's scored some important goals. And I just think you're looking at a comparison. You're not comparing apples with the clubs.
No.
So he's got more people expected. And Brian, when he was playing for Brentford, if you went to see Brentford play, you'd think that if they're going to do anything, that one of those two is going to have to do it, which is a bit unfair, but simplifying it because it wasn't quite that case. But he was very much to the fore of Brentford. This is why he got the move, obviously, and why they both got the move. So I thought in the games that I saw for Manchester United last season, I saw quite a few. He was very good.
Yeah, but now he needs to be one of the best forwards in the country again, which he was at Brentford, and I think he can be. Wissa Well, I mean, he couldn't have had a better game against Liverpool. So we'll see where it goes from there.
The comparison with Isak was
well, he's next.
Outstanding in Worcester's favour, really, wasn't it? So on the day.
He's next. I'm going to compare Alexander Isak to Jean-Philippe Mateta. Let me just go back to those 2 seasons ago again. Isak, 23 goals. Under Visa, 19. You had Ollie Watkins on 16, who apparently refused to play for Villa or to be a substitute for Villa at Brighton. On 15, Cunha, who was then at Wolves, and Palmer at Chelsea. And on 14, Mateta at Crystal Palace and Strand Larsen at Wolves, now of Crystal Palace. Mateta currently claiming that his last year of his contract should be invalid. His attempts at scoring for Crystal Palace at Everton were invalid because they were absolutely hopeless. Alexander Isak and Jean-Philippe Mateta.
Are you comparing them as grumpy footballers? They clearly are strong-minded individuals who believe in their rights, and I think Isak. I don't know if Isak had been sold. There'd have been no hoo-ha about it. There'd have been no sort of talk of, in quotes, strike action. I just feel he would have had a better time at Liverpool to this point. He still could have a very, very good time at Liverpool. But I just think it's tainted a little bit by the action. And Mateta, who's had some great moments in Crystal Palace's, the golden years of the club, and he's been part of that. And yeah, he's also tried to get away before. So he's a late developer because he got into the World Cup squad, and he must thank Palace for that. The opportunity to play in Premier League football in a good team, and a team that was winning trophies and getting headlines in other parts of the world. But he's not the most natural finisher. He's very hard working. He's a focal point. I think he's more of a focal point than Isak is. Isak's more of a like Worcester. But I do think Mateta give him. He's on the pitch. And he scored some winning goals in a Palace team where it might be the only goal of the game. And he was very slow. He didn't really. Glasner made him, didn't he? He'd been at Palace for a while, and suddenly when Glasner came in, he found the trick. He found the trigger point for JP to become the player that is now, I suppose, feeling entitled that he can make a fuss about his future. I think it's always sad when these things happen, when they become public as well. Fans never get the whole story. We don't know the whole story, whether this contract is legal or not. It looks from everything that's being said by the lawyers that this extra year is exactly what it says on the piece of paper that he signed. So whether it will settle down, I don't know. He had a bad injury, of course, as well, which didn't help. And whether he feels now he's got one big move in him to maximise the financial side of it. He's probably not the best paid Premier League forward who's scoring, who's on that list. And those goal scorers are entitled to the big bucks because they win you the games. So it's a shame. Crystal Palace seemed to lurch from one of these internal crises to another, and they didn't look. Sarge, the new coach, it was one of the things I was going to mention later. He said after the Everton game, I thought my players gave up. That's not a good scenario to be banging on about your contract. So let's see. But the comparisons, I think, at the moment, in my mind, is about the rumpus that they are causing or have caused.
Yeah, I feel. I mean, as a vigorously grumpy person myself, I should feel some kind of sympathy for these people. But you're part of a team, and I understand that you may need to get away, but do it with a smile. Just do it with a smile. Don't do it by going on strike or whatever. You don't have to muck up the dressing room in order to do it. You can come out and do it with a smile. That's what Kevin Keegan would have done. And
to be fair to Mateta, hasn't mentioned striking. I don't think.
No, well, my problem with Isak, the footballer, I never fancied him. In his first 2 years at Newcastle, he was occasionally a hit or totally anonymous. And I think the issue with Isak isn't his quality and his skill, which is definitely top drawer. It's whether it's there all the time. And in his last 2 seasons at Newcastle, it was, and he was outstanding. And that's why Liverpool signed him for the money that they did. But as soon as he's gone there, he's gone back to the anonymity that he often produced in his first 2 years at Newcastle. Now, he's had a pre-season this season, which he didn't have last season because of all the going on strike at Newcastle. But at Newcastle, in his first game of the season for Liverpool, he was totally anonymous.
Yeah, I mean, I saw Isak and Gyökeres play together for Sweden, and I talked to Graham Potter, of course, a Sweden manager, someone you know, and about playing them together. And it didn't always work because they were on the wrong end of a couple of results. But when it did work, it worked spectacularly. Both scored and both assisted in one game, and maybe that's a clue to getting the best out of Isak, to have another forward. But listen, we could bang on for the rest of the podcast forever about having 2 attackers. Just go back to the Fulham Chelsea game. We're Fulham at 3-2 down with 7 or 8 minutes to go. And where was the people going forward? Where was the ball into the box? The old-fashioned way of trying to get an equaliser. And they still stuck to their format of passing the ball forward. And I was sitting in the middle of Fulham fans, and they were going on. They were totally frustrated about it, because there was no plan for let's do in training. What do we do when we're 3-2 down and the time is running out? Well, let's send Bassi up front to try and scramble. I mean, if you lose 3-2, you might as well, if you take the risk of losing 4-2, but you might get a 3-3 out of it. So forwards, you have to look at forwards, at what their surroundings are, who's making the chances for them, how is their best game the main part of the main plan for the team. I guess it is for Isak, but I think that playing for Liverpool at the moment looks a bit of a weight on his shoulders. I mentioned in Burma, shrugged that off straight away playing for Manchester United. And maybe only those close to him would know. But the weight of expectation at Newcastle, although Newcastle is a fabulous club with great fans and a city centre club, and there is expectation, but it's not the same as playing for Liverpool.
Next comparison, Miles Lewis-Skelly and Martin Zubimendi.
Well, you're setting them up as rivals for a place in Arsenal's midfield, aren't you? Lewis Skelly was a midfield player as a kid, or he's still a kid, but as a very much as a scholar, and then went to left back and got himself an England cap and an England goal. And it's just to fill a gap and get in the team. But really always was said to be a midfield player. And now he's getting opportunities in midfield, and he looks a Premier League midfield player. And his creativity. I mean, Zubimendi is somebody you'd love to have in your team if you were, if you need security. He's a great. Smelling danger is something in my little world of coaching in academy football, we don't find enough players who smell danger, who see almost before in the dugout we see it, who sees there's a possibility of the counter-attacking football is so big now. People who smell danger stop those counter-attacks because they recognise it almost before they develop. And Zubimendi is really good at that. So I don't think they're comfortable in that they're competing for a spot in the Champions team and to play in the Champions League as well as the Premier League. So you can't have too many of them. And Arsenal, I think one of the great strengths of what's happened is they are built when you're winning, when you're never more attractive than when you've just won a trophy for a club that's joined. Now, these players have joined, obviously, this guy's come through the ranks, but they bolstered the team in other departments, and the squad is exceptional, and they're part of it.
Yeah, well, that's what Liverpool tried to do the year before and have consummately failed. When not failing, but they were just a little bit nervous and not steady towards the end of the season, Arsenal, and needed that solidity to get them through to the title. They went and put Lewis Skelly in holding midfield ahead of Zubimendi, ahead of him in selection, left Zubimendi out. And he was a completely different player. And he is a silky passer of the ball who likes to push on up and service the players ahead of him, rather than Zubimendi, who's a very neat and tidy and good thinking footballer, but doesn't have that let's get a goal now attitude of Lewis Skelly. I think Lewis Skelly has brought a completely new dimension to Arsenal with their creativity. And he's more of an Andrea Pirlo, I think, type of player. He doesn't hold back. And of course, he's got Declan Rice to fill in for him if he goes and supports. And I think that he has brought an extra element to Arsenal's game that people were saying only last week, is Lewis Skelly going to leave? For me, he's one of the first names on the team sheet at Arsenal now. I think he's an absolutely magnificent player, and I would be very surprised if he's not in the England squad from now on as a midfielder.
Well, I have to say, you're not Mikel Arteta who makes that decision. But it's the kind of thing that managers love, to be able to have these options. And I would say, Neil, that it would be the nature of the fixture and how they set up. And also the workload, of course, is very important these days. And Lewis Skelly's of an age where he can play every day, but they don't let you do that. Zubimendi's a much more mature player, and their qualities, apart from their footballing skills, that would you trust Lewis Skelly, who's been sent off a couple of times, hasn't he? In something that got over emotional. You can imagine Zubimendi would be a calming person. So, as I said, we're not comparing really. We're comparing two Arsenal players and giving Arteta a wonderful problem about how to service the best needs of the team by using their and other rival midfield players' talents. I mean, I'm amazed you didn't have Lewis Skelly as your young player of the three of the best, because he definitely qualified.
Yeah.
So
I'm just trying to go around the houses and get everyone in. But
yeah,
I do think that Zubimendi gives you the same thing every week. Lewis Skelly gives the opposition something that they can't. They've just got to defend against the best they can, because he's such a creative player.
Well, you're putting him on the same level as Cole Palmer at the moment.
Well, I'm going to throw one in.
He's got a bit to do to be that. But
yeah, no,
listen,
I agree.
It's great, and I love the players coming through. I mentioned one of their own with Josh King and Jack Hinchelwood. Arsenal don't have many of their own, and to have one, it means a lot to the fans. So for him to be sold would be very disappointing for the supporters, and that was certainly the case last season. How is he going to build? He's lost his England place, didn't go to the World Cup, and now he's a shining starlet again, and he's got to become a shining star, which he's got every chance of doing that.
And I'm going to throw one in at you here that I haven't warned you about. Phil Foden and Cole Palmer.
Yeah, that was Thomas Tuchel. Ask him.
We left him,
and he went for neither. He obviously went for neither. But I saw Cole Palmer in the flesh less than 24 hours ago. He was absolutely magnificent. And Phil Foden, I've raved about in my commentary. I've seen him score hat-tricks in the Premier League on more than one occasion. And he's had a bump in the road, Phil, and now he's got a chance. I mean, Manchester City got a result in them, but with Mark Gay playing in midfield, that was one of the interesting talking points of the first weekend, wasn't it? So I think It's funny that England, I always felt England are lucky to have them both, and then they chose to have neither and still had their best World Cup outside of England of all time. So,
yeah, I mean, look, both lost their way, didn't they? Without any shadow of doubt last season. And I would not blame Tuchel at all for not taking either under the circumstances, especially as he had such a large choice in those positions. It was interesting. Yeah, Gahey played midfield, but Foden played number 10 in what was a fairly less fluid 4-2-3-1 than the unpack way, and he just, it all looked a bit too methodology for what Phil Foden's grown up with, and not enough flair for the moment. I thought, and it just, he didn't really get into the game an awful lot. And you could see why sometimes he performed better off the wide areas where he'd have more space. Palmer played like an inside right number 10 in a 3-4-2-1 and had the whole right side of the pitch really to operate in, and really ran the game, and was behind the first 2 goals and then scored the third, and was back to his absolute best. That is the level that Foden should be at, because we've seen him be at that. And I don't know how he's going to rejuvenate that, but it's in him, and somehow it's tragic if it doesn't come back.
what you're saying, Neil, I think, and it does happen, is the coaching is about the team, the group, and individualism is sometimes not seen as good for that overall pattern. And I think then players get told, well, you don't take him on there. We want another pass there. And even in his best times and he's had some wonderful times, I keep saying this, more than 100 goals for Manchester City. And I do see the value in players who score, but you can't win if you don't have them. But that some of that cheekiness has to go for the common good, and whether that's happened, only Phil will be able to tell us that. But I saw Palmer unleashed at Fulham, and he played for the team, but he also had wonderful individual moments. The shot that went across the face of the goal actually was a corner, which he appealed for. It did take a flick. I was right behind the goal. And that kind of moment, it's interesting. It's unusual for me as a media person to sit in the crowd at a Premier League game, and I had to learn the culture of when you stand up and when you don't. And when Fulham were getting into that penalty where Josh King scored as that punt at the end of the ground, everybody stands up in the moment. So that's fine. I can stand up. I'm quite tall, so I'm very aware that people are behind me. And they said, my friend who kindly gave me the ticket, he said, "Oh well, it won't happen in the second half because they won't stand up when Chelsea, because it's the Fulham side. The Chelsea fans, as you know, Neil, are on the other side. It is the away end, isn't it? Half of it's the away end." But when Cole Palmer got the ball, everybody stood up because he carried that threat, and that you didn't want to miss a moment, even if you were supporting the team on the wrong end of it. You didn't want to miss a moment from a genius of a player, and they're both fabulous players. It's life, isn't it? Nobody's at their best all the time, and off the back of average seasons, I prefer to remember them and the Cole's season before the one you referred to when you were looking at the top goal scorers, where he was sensational. And Phil, I mean, the day he and Erling got back hat tricks against Man United in the derby, the same game, was one of the great games I've been privileged to commentate on. Two of the great performances. By the way, what about Erling's haircut then? Is that not one of the that not one of the talking points of the weekend? The flowing mane has gone. The Lion King. He's the king still, but not the lion anymore.
No, the ball bastard king now. Nothing will change the fact that Erling Haaland is a one-off in his looks as well as in his football, and probably in his bank account as well.
That's some competition at the level that he's operating.
And I'll tell you what, I wouldn't have an argument with him.
No. I wouldn't have an argument with his dad.
And Roy Keane did.
Yeah, he did.
And Gabriel has had a lot of arguments with Erling, and he's actually come off worst as a result. Yes. I think he needs to get to like him and talk to him during the game rather than argue with him and fight him. My final comparison, I was amazed to discover that there have only been 4 occasions since the Premier League was formed when 2 of the 3 promoted clubs have won on the opening weekend of the season. One of those was back in 1997-98. Bolton and Crystal Palace did it. And the other 3 have all been this decade, which when you think of 2 consecutive seasons when the 3 promoted clubs have been relegated, the other 3 have been 2021-22 when Brentford and Watford came up. And I think Watford did go down, didn't they? Last season, Leeds and Sunderland, who both stayed up. So Leeds and Sunderland is one comparison with Ipswich and Hull, who did it for the 4th time in the Premier League. 2 promoted clubs winning their first game of the season. Leeds and Sunderland with Ipswich and Hull. Can Ipswich and Hull stay up like Leeds and Sunderland?
Well, it's a great start. I mean, that awful wait for your first win or your first point, that's happened to some promoted teams that have been looking dreadfully out of their depth, and then panic buying sets in, and it usually leads to a rapid return to where they come from. But they both look as though they've bought well, and I mean, I must say, Hull's intensity was very impressive. There was a great belief around the club that all this pessimistic talk elsewhere in football about them was an inspiration to them, really. That they knew their strengths because obviously they've been working on them. But to come out and do that, I mean, an amazing start. I mean, Hull's record against Manchester United was virtually non-existent, wasn't it? And then to come and beat a team that's been talked up because of a decent season last season and more new signings. So if they can replicate that, I mean, why not? Ipswich, of course, have had the recent failure to come up and go straight down again. Not that many of those players remain now. But then Julio and Ciso, I think they've pulled off a trick, haven't they? Because he was always good at Brighton, and when played in France, I don't know whether he's a difficult character to manage. He was involved. Paraguay didn't have the best reputation at the end of the World Cup, did they? But as a talent, he's as a commentator, when he plays, his name's on the team sheet. You've got to keep a weather eye out for something that might be very special. Of course.
Well, he did his cruciate ligament, didn't he? And he struggled to come back from that for a year, and that's why he went out on loan and what have you. I saw him before that score one of the most brilliant goals imaginable. I think it was a winner against Chelsea. And
at the bridge, wasn't it? At Stamford Bridge, yeah.
And or maybe it was an equaliser. I can't remember. It was a sensational goal, and he early on got a lot of publicity for sensational goals, and I think he is a really good player, but he's got to do it every week. I've got to say that you know me, I'm obsessed with goalkeepers. I was really, really impressed with Hull's Konstantinos. So I can't even remember his surname now. I'd have to look it up. But I thought Konstantinos. I'm looking it up as I talk to you. I thought he had very little to do against a poor United side. But Konstantinos Zolakis, Greek, from Olympiacos, they brought him. He had very little to do against a poor Manchester United side, but Mbeumo had 2 fierce shots at his goal, and he produced 2 outstanding saves. And that, in a 2-0 victory, won them 2 points. And you can talk about the goal scorers winning you the game, and you're right, but you need to talk about the goalkeeper because he saved you 2 points. And it's those kind of moments that keep your team up. I don't know how good a goalkeeper he is over the season, but I do know that he's already got them 2 more points than they would have had if they've had another goalkeeper. And I'm not saying they're not good enough, but the Coventry goalkeeper and the Tottenham goalkeeper didn't have good games in defeat. And
the Chelsea goalkeeper in victory.
Yeah, true. But he didn't cost them points this time, although he tried. But the Hull goalkeeper was nowhere near man of the match, but he won them 2 points that they would otherwise have lost. And I was really impressed with him. And if he can do that another 5 times this season, or 4 times this season, he'll have won them 10 points. And that'll be a good foundation for them to stay up. Whether they'll get the goals, the 2 goals they got were both by defenders from set plays. They can't count on that every week. But Hull, I think, bought the same number of players as Sunderland did the year before. I worry about Sunderland this season. They've only signed Thomas Meunier and one other who's 34 and one other fullback. I'm worried about them. Ipswich and Ciso, yeah, he needs to do that every week.
I've learned not to take too seriously the first results. I'm a product, and you remember this, of the 70s when Carlisle United, in their only ever season in the top 5, won their first 3 games. We talk about this all the time because one of them was against Chelsea, and got relegated. You know, it was still 2 points for a win then, so you didn't get the extra clout. Then drawing was seen as a good result, where it's less of that now. So let's see. We do this because we're romantics about the game, and there is a natural favouring of the underdog, if you like, because that's the kind of people we are. So I hope they perform well. And Ipswich have always been a club of high standards, of run well by good people, and they are hopefully treading a path with a bit more permanency to it than the one they trod a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Okay, that is comparisons. And now it is Martin Tyler's letter from the gantry.
Letter from the gantry.
Cheers, Neil. The perceived wisdom for life as an older person is to keep busy. So I thought I would use this letter to let you in on how I've spent my time since the last podcast, even though my commentary services are less in demand these days. A week in the life of an aging football addict. I should explain at the start that the backdrop to what I'm about to tell you is that I'm moving house for the first time in 36 years. I am surrounded by packing cases as I write, and every waking hour, which is not full on football, is devoted to stripping and emptying my current dwelling, the house of a grade A hoarder, incidentally. I have kept the vast majority of my 50-plus years of commentary notes on the very unlikely grounds that they might just contain a nugget of information for the present day. On Tuesday, I enlisted the help of 2 carpenters to see if it was possible to transfer to my new address the bookcases that have contained this vast volume of records. Happily, the answer was yes. And amidst the obvious football chat, it came out that Carpenter 1 had a son who plays. at under-21 level. For Arsenal, no less, and was in action that very evening at Barnet in the EFL Trophy. Archie Stevens, a promising winger, played all 90 minutes then, and again at the weekend when he lined up alongside Max Dowman, no less, against Crystal Palace. Small world. Tuesday also saw the kickoff of this season's National League Cup, which also gives under-21 teams from Premier League 2 the chance to show their skills against full-time clubs from our fifth tier. For many gifted youngsters, a first taste of men's football. Woking's opening such fixture was against West Bromwich Albion, a rivalry with a bit of history. Notably that 4-2 FA Cup upset at the Hawthorns in 1991, containing a hat-trick from Tim Buzaglo, who's better known these days as the father of the effervescent Olivia, a shining light on TV as a football presenter and reporter. The game was uneventful and goalless. Penalties are part of the agenda for this competition, and Albion won. The abiding memory for a traditionalist like me was of the baggy, splendid blue and white striped shirts, a design for the ages. It could have been Derek Kevin out there, or Bomber Brown. On Wednesday, it was housework early and late. In between, 2 Woking Academy games, back-to-back, 2 wins, the under-17s against Kinetic Academy, a very worthy organisation with a Chelsea connection. On Thursday, I put the domestics on hold for a morning's cricket, only 20 minutes away from my current abode, on a ground owned by Fulham. It's where their academy is based. It also backs onto the training centre for AFC Wimbledon. It was the second 11s of Surrey and Kent. Always plenty of football chat. Surrey coach Jack Brooks, very concerned about his beloved Oxford United. Kent's Joe Denley, purring about Arsenal's performance in the Community Shield a few days earlier. The champions would be equally impressive in the opening Premier League fixture at home to Coventry on the Friday evening, though I would only take that in later via my Skybox. Simultaneously, Woking under-18s were away in the Suburban League, which is an open age competition, their chance to play against men. The game was away to Cobham, a club on the up, thanks to the first-team coaching of Craig Lewington, the younger son of the legendary Ray. I give you the details because they were extraordinary. Woking 3 down after 20 minutes, only to reply with 3 goals of their own in a 6-minute window leading up to half-time. That fueled the expectation of a goal fest continuing into the second half, but the only score came in the 7th minute of added time, a remarkable comeback completed right at the end. Within a matter of 17 hours, I was witnessing a similar act of escapology at senior level. While Hull City were finishing off Manchester United, Woking, already played 2, lost 2 in the National League, were also trailing to a newly promoted team at their level, AFC Fylde. But in the 90th and 93rd minutes, somehow turned a 2-1 deficit into a 3-2 win for their first 3 points of the season. Working my way up the pyramid now, on Sunday, Brighton kindly gave me access to their opening Premier League game, where the story was before, during and after the match about their opponents Aston Villa. The Europa League winners seemed to be dismantling their successful side because of the cost of assembling it and sustaining it. Gong, Rodgers, Tielemans, Digne, and most recently Concert, finding the exit door soon, seemingly, Watkins and Martinez. Emi Buendia, supported by Ross Barkley, was their attack at the Amex, and in truth, the former squandered a first-rate chance at 0-0. But it didn't stay that way for long. Brighton rattled in 4 goals in a 23-minute spell, and 9 minutes after that, Villa were down to 10 men. João Gomez, signed from Wolves, one of the supposedly cheaper options, was sent off on his Villa Premier League debut. Ironically, watching on from the gantry was the only other Villa player to suffer such a fate, Lee Hendry, at QPR in 1995. The Villa with 10 men and hours still to play didn't concede again was a credit to their remaining players. And so to yesterday, and the chance, thanks to a good friend's spare ticket, to witness one of the now ex-Villa players. Morgan Rogers marked his Chelsea debut with a goal at Fulham. All of Chelsea front 3 scored in an excellent South West London derby at Craven Cottage. The 3-2 margin took the tally of goals I had seen in the flesh in the 7 days to 25, 1 for every 3 cardboard boxes that have been my other far less fun focus. That was my week. That was.
Brilliant. Yeah. Oh, God, you're a fogey, you. Oh, Absolutely superb. I won't go on about Derek Kevin of West
Because
Brom.
he signed for Chelsea, didn't he?
He did. Transfer deadline 1963.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were going to bring him up. When we were going for promotion out of the second division, he came to score the goals to take us up, and he was crap. But he got the opening goal of the game on the last match of the season that we needed to win. It was Tuesday night against Portsmouth, and we won 7-0. So I love Derek.
He had played for England, so he had some pedigree.
Yeah, I don't know.
You should have signed Bomber Brown. Now he wouldn't have let you down.
He was a great player.
Yeah.
Did he play for England?
Once, I think.
Tony Brown?
Tony Brown, yeah.
He was an absolutely brilliant player. And then he followed them as in the press box for decades. And I had a disagreement with him in the press box because he took a penalty in an FA Cup tie at Chelsea in about 1968, 1969 it was, 1969. And Peter Bonetti saved it. And I just thought I'd remind him of that. And he reminded me that he still got the winner in a 2-1 victory in the yeah, top man. Tony.
Top man, yeah.
He won that round. Okay. Letter from the Gantry. You can, of course, read Letter from the Gantry miles behind, but catching up now on our Substack.com site, The Joy of Football Substack, which for reading, and my increasingly manic original articles as well. Don't forget the Patreon. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and join us. Just get more involved and enjoy our last segment of this week and another returning segment. One game, Martin, the opening weekend of a season.
I've had so many. I've been privileged to be given an opening fixture on most weekends, certainly at Sky. And I've given it a lot of thought. But the one that really does stand out for lots of different reasons, and we've banged on about, and this is a good podcast for the Brentford fans, because it's Brentford 2, Arsenal 0, which was still in the COVID time, but Brentford, who hadn't been in the top division of English football since the 1940s, were finally shown the promise. Obviously, selling a lot of their very well developed players, who got them so far but didn't get them up. But this time they did, and so they were at home on the Friday night, which is now the way that television does it, as they did with Arsenal against Coventry. And they were playing Arsenal, and I had not really followed too much in the Championship how they got to. I'd watched the 1 or 2 games near the end of the season, but I felt very short on my knowledge. And thanks to several people at Brentford, Phil Giles, who is still there on the admin side, and of course Thomas Frank, who gave the final okay, and the club doctor, who checked me out when I arrived at the training ground. They let me watch the training. I was checked out for COVID, nothing else. But obviously, it was an important thing at the time. And had I failed that test, I wouldn't have been able to tell you this story. But they were so welcoming. They understood my dilemma. They trusted me that I wouldn't be. And thankfully, so many people I've only, I think, on one occasion let a manager down in terms of 50 years of knowing information that I'm privileged to get and other people didn't have. Anyway, so I watched the last training session on the Thursday morning before the game on the Friday night, including the set pieces, and that was a focal part of and still is, of the Brentford methodology. But it was a locked off training ground because of the health scare and because of, obviously, they were rehearsing for the biggest game in the history of post-war Brentford, really. And of course, then they played the game. They won the game. They scored from one of the set pieces that I saw, and I hope I wasn't too sort of I don't know, smart-assed about it, but I knew what the plan was because I'd seen them do it. And often the things in training don't work, but theirs have worked. And it worked to get the second goal of the game. And they won 2-0. And it was a night Mikel Arteta was at his spikiest because he felt that things went against Arsenal, including the staging of the fixture on the Friday, I believe. But that was, and here we are now. It wasn't a flash in the pan. We've just been talking about what first games can mean to clubs, and whether, for Hull and Ipswich, this is going to be all the years later going to be seen as a trigger point for a long run in the Premier League. But it was for Brentford, and their kindness, I think, made me choose this because I wanted to express it. Because we commentators, we ask a lot really because we want to be on the inside, but they know that when we're out, we cross the line. If something goes wrong, we have to be critical. That's our jobs as well. I've had people say to me when I've almost even had to apologise for being critical. And Gareth Southgate, for one, where he had a bad game playing for Villa against Chelsea, Neil, where he was responsible for a couple of goals at Villa Park. And I saw him a few weeks later playing for England. And I said, I'm sorry I had to criticise you. And he said, you wouldn't have been doing your job properly if you hadn't, because I was terrible on the day. You don't always get that honesty. Thanks to Brentford for that memory, and very pleased for them that they've gone on to where they are today.
My game, I go back to 2012. First game of the 2012-13 season. Chelsea just won the Champions League. We were away to Wigan. And we had signed Eden Hazard that summer, so it was his Premier League debut. But we wanted another winger. And everyone knew that the winger that we wanted was Victor Moses, who played for Wigan. And of course, it was mid-August, and the transfer deadline didn't end until the end of August. So Chelsea scored in the first couple of minutes, and it was all bonhomie up at the Chelsea end. And the chant started, we'll see you next week. We'll see you next week. Victor Moses, we'll see you next week. And it went on the whole game. Every time he went near the ball, we'll see you next week, Victor Moses. And we did see him next week. He joined Chelsea, and later on he won the league at Chelsea under Antonio Conte. But it just brings into sharp focus this transfer deadline. And here we are again, starting the league with the transfer deadline still another, I think, 8 days to go when the weekend finished on the Monday night. Is the transfer deadline sensible?
Well, you're asking a modern day question, and I can only give you an old-fashioned answer, which is it was never sensible. It should have been, it was perfectly adequate as it was before. And had been so for years, where it was either the last Thursday in March or the penultimate Thursday in March, and that to stop teams who were going for things, buying up players just for 2 months of football, really, or in fact, in those days, probably about 6 weeks of football. It used to finish at the end of April, early May, and that seemed to cover all the bases. When it came in, I thought some stakeholder in the game would say that it's a restraint of trade.
Yeah, I do.
And it never happened because obviously enough stakeholders in the game, the powerful side of it, decided it was a good thing. And I don't think it's good. It creates false economies. Suddenly somebody, when the clock is ticking on that final day, you get some ridiculous deals or some ridiculous prices dip. And the game doesn't benefit from that, in my opinion. There'll be those who will say, well, if it went back to the old system, but in non-league football, that old system still exists, and of course the monies aren't so many noughts on the end, but it still seems a sensible thing. And you do occasionally stockpile players. In my 20 years in non-league coaching, I've been involved where we better get another couple of bodies in. That's not what happens in the elite level. But no, I keep the stats, Neil, and I always look back. And one of the things I do is which team has at the end of the season, they've got as many players who started the season. You know, what's the closest lineup to the first game in the last game? Now, sometimes it's distorted by they're giving somebody a game in the last game, you know, a youngster. But you come back and you go, oh, God, he played a game for them. And he's played 30-odd games for another Premier League team, but he played one game. They're the first game of the season, or 2 or 3 games. If it runs in. And they're just not really part of that season for that club, but they were at the time. And then they played because they were still on that list, still an employee of that club while their move was being finalised. So I don't like it, and I think any attempts to try and make it before the season kicks off, we've got, you know, the EFL kicks off earlier than the Premier League, so there's this discrepancy there. Other countries around Europe, they seem to have different transfer deadlines. Nobody seems to worry about that. Yeah. When Russia were involved, they had different deadlines. So I don't know whether we could just come out but then you can get players in because, or you can sell to a club who've got an open transfer window. It's hard to set a clock by it for the whole world, so don't do it.
I agree with you a lot. I think that one of the disadvantages of the transfer window is that the chief executives or whoever it is dealing with the actual financial side of it like to leave the transfers till late because they think they're clever negotiators, not mentioning people like Daniel Levy as being the obvious one, but many have been like that, when the absolute priority is not the clever financial idiots who are ruining our game, but is getting the players in for pre-season so that you can have your squad ready for your coach to do their work and get the players ready for a season's unity. That has completely gone out of the window since the transfer window came in. The other thing I've got a problem with is that they're not very good at it, a lot of these negotiators, and too many teams are imbalanced come the closure of the window. So if you're going to keep the window, I would like, especially with injuries as well in the contemporary game, I would like each team to be able to sell one player and buy one player in the closed window between the end of September and the beginning of the new year, and then between the end of January and the March cutoff that used to be. But on top of that, what I really see as a restraint of trade is when you have these big squads now. If you are fit and you don't get selected, and say you don't get selected for a month or 6 weeks, I think you should have a right to move. I don't think you should have to wait until the transfer window opens. I'm not saying a free move, but you should have a right to a move because your trade is being restrained and the coach doesn't fancy you. So you must have a right to move on. I mean, it's not like Ollie Watkins or Jean-Philippe Mateta or Alexander Isak. I'm talking about guys who have been in the bomb squads around the country and what have you, or just on the bench and not getting a game ever.
What about Harvey Elliott, who wasn't picked because of the contract said if he played one more game, they were committed to buying him and they didn't want to buy him. You know, those sort of things. That is totally restraint of trade. I mean, and Harvey's a decent young man who was pushing hard to try and get some regular football to move from being in England under-21 international and a very fine prospect into getting the adult football, the first team football at the high level. So, you know, that doesn't seem right. And I think in any other industry, he would have had the entitlement to say, I'm sorry, I need to go and work somewhere else. And the reason was, Neil, that I think they put into it was to stop people bolstering the rich clubs could buy all the time, so that they get. But now you have to name squads, so it's no good. If you're going to sign 3 or 4 players to strengthen, say Ipswich in October or November, then they've already given us. So the 3 or 4 others will have to come out. So it does balance itself off without now. You can't buy all the players that you want, as used to be. It didn't really happen very often. But there was the risk that the big clubs just got the checkbook out. Oh, we lost 3 in a row. Get the checkbook out. So I think the game would be better off going back to what it was before, because there are restraints now, and which there weren't before. You never had to name your 25 Premier League players when the transfer window didn't exist.
No. But I'd just like to say I was very pleased that we did see Victor Moses the next week. I was a big fan of Victor Moses.
I remember, of course, the Wigan's first ever game in the Premier League was against Chelsea, wasn't it? When they got promoted. We've been talking about first day games. That was one that I did when Hernan Crespo, right at the end, spoiled the Wigan party. But,
1-0 with a 25-yard left-footer top corner. Yeah. Yeah. That would have been 2005, 2006. Yeah. Okay, Martin, I'm feeling better already.
Good.
For an hour or so with you, and a half nearly, and 23 minutes we're on. I think we better go quickly, don't you?
Yeah, you'll have a relapse if you have any more of me. That's for sure.
From Martin and me.
See ya.
Ta-ra.